Namaste and welcome to The Native, tribe behind every child, brought to you by Dreamspire in association with Purple Bee Studio. And with us today in our tribe, we have Kruti. She's a psychologist working in the capacity of a counselor at a school. Very excited to have her here because I'm going to talk to her about counseling, dealing with kids from various generations, understanding the importance of diagnosis in the process, understanding how counseling and the landscape has changed over the years. So, we're going to deep dive into a lot of conversation on these lines. Stay tuned. Hi, Kruti.
Hi, Niyati.
It is an amazing feeling to have you here. I'm meeting you after a long time.
Likewise.
And I remember a lot of our long, deep conversations that we've had. And it has been a pleasure working with you in the past. And now that we are sitting here and talking like this, it's amazing. So thank you for coming. Thank you for taking out the time for us.
Thank you for having me and addressing such an important topic. And likewise, feeling is very likewise.
So, Kruti, you started your journey as a counselor in 2013 and we are in 2025. How has the landscape changed according to you from then to now?
I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, you can talk about it's an entire generation shift that's coming from 2013 to 2025. And if you're looking at in with respect to work, with respect to counseling or with respect to psychology, a lot of work and a lot of difference has come in here. Awareness, acceptance, willingness to go for therapy, or even just knowing the term has come in a long way with them. So there's been a long way that we as professionals in the field has walked, and things that we've seen around us as well, like people around us that have walked closer towards us. Lot of difference.
Yeah, you're right. And that's what we want to talk about today is the awareness and how have the taboos broken down. Are there still any taboos? Is there still any resistance for people to kind of, seek counseling? I know that you are working as a counselor in a school. What is the difference between a counselor and a psychologist? Can we tell our audience just to understand? Because, I know that to understand this space would be it'll make our conversation more clear.
Sure. So psychologists usually are the ones who also goes in for assessments and gives you all a diagnosis. Alongside, they are also offering therapy or offering help in that aspect. Counselors are the one who are more available for support, emotional, and they're into a lot of therapy. They're a lot into counseling. They do not have any assessments involved in their practice. So that's like the basic difference. However, if you look at it in terms of offering help, both offer help. You can go to seek help or therapy from both perspectives. That's absolutely available. The minute and the most important difference between a psychologist and a counselor is this,
Fair, understood. That's a good understanding to start off with. I was just reading through a study which said that 1 out of 7 children between the ages of 10 to 19 face emotional trouble, social emotional problems worldwide. 1 out of 7 children. What is your take on this?
The numbers come out now. This was always there. It's unfortunate that there was always a need for someone to kind of seek help. This number was always there. It's just, thank God, to awareness, what we spoke a little while ago. It's come out to people, and now the numbers become so much more prominent is also because of the spaces that they're coming in. So much, the confounding variables is what we call as the environmental aspect, the societal aspect, the parental, where they're growing, the pressure. A lot of things come in place to kind of get that number as 1 in 7. Instead, if I can take the liberty to say that it's not just the ages 10 to 19, the age is shot down to as good as maybe 4 or 5. So, and that age group has become wider in terms of taking the research or getting your numbers in place. So that's where we are with concerns, with emotional needs and mental health, that's where we are with kids. And that's the kind of need, or to some extent want, of what we need to do. And it's a crazy number that we're talking about right now. Talks about how much more often do we really need to even look out for different things to be able to identify and to seek for interventions,
So, kids nowadays, I see, are very expressive. This number that we're talking about brings me to this conversation that kids are very expressive nowadays, but the layers of the struggle has also increased, right? As we see. And we deal with kids a lot.
Absolutely.
We've been dealing with kids since the past 12, 13 years, right? So, why is the struggle increasing according to you?
Various factors. I think the most recent one, post-COVID era space that comes in, is the addiction to screen. If I'm looking at the topmost layer, and then we can scaffold into the other ones. So the first one, like lately that's come up, is so much kind of addiction, shutting them down. Not that they want to do it by choice, but it's just naturally flowing in for everyone. They're all very social online, but there's nobody social offline. The skills that someone needs to kind of build in is not there as much, so the physical movement, not there as much. Again, we are not generalizing this entire conversation to everybody, but if you're going to look at into the ratio, yes, the ratio is much more higher in not having that versus someone who's actually consciously making an effort in doing it. So struggles with the layers, one of it begins with the addiction and with the younger age, and sometimes you don't know whom to blame. Is it the parents who are busy, exhausted, or is it the child who just doesn't know what to do, and hence screen is something that I need to get into? Apart from that, so many other reasons that flows or naturally comes in, Indian society and the taboo that comes in with a lot of how the child is behaving, why the child is behaving. And because of that, the kind of issues also comes in, not behaving in a particular way or not responding in a particular way. Hence the behaviors come in, and the obvious other issues about the neurodivergent, whether you look at the ADHD, you look at autism, you look at learning disabilities, they're there, but they're not yet, we're not aware about it. We don't have a term to it. So those obvious behavioral concerns come up, that adds on to the struggles of them. Societal pressure, like I spoke about, that's also a lot. Indirect. Now we are into that, what do we call the now generations, the alpha coming in. So we are all very cool and posing up saying, "Arey, ye to sab theek hai yaar, koi baat nahi." But is it really there? Are we really?
It's only to show.
Yeah, most times.
Internally, what is happening is
we don't know. I mean, I don't know how many of us are actually listening to hear. And that's why the layers or the struggles that you're talking about exist, but are not like scaffolded. We're not there to peel it open. One of it, like I said, was addiction. One of it, like we say, is the pressure that's coming in. Other bits are attention, wanting from the parents, getting it, not getting it the way they want it or not, and the academic need to thrive is so high. And I somewhere also feel that it's also very self-inflicted by children sometimes, because nowadays parents, I must give it to them, they're trying really hard to be there as support and coping mechanisms for their kids. But there are times that kids themselves are so ambitious where they may forget the aspect of being ambitious and being unrealistic.
So how does counseling plays a very important role here, because that's the big difference between when we were kids and the kids of today that we are dealing with.
Right.
They are more ambitious, they are more expressive, they know more because they have exposure to so many things that are happening out in the world. And that's where I think counseling plays a very, very important role. As a counselor, if you seek help from a counselor professionally, or as parents who are counseling the kids, what has changed? Because I know attention seeking was a concern even when we were kids, of course, but our parents dealt with that very differently compared to the parents of today. You are a mother, you know what you are doing to cater to those requirements? How has it changed?
I believe when we were growing up, no, millennials, or we always grew up with a tribe, picking up from your few podcasts that I may have heard before. We grew up with people. So the need for attention was always indirectly fulfilled. Right now, there are a lot of families that are living and growing and thriving together, which is great. But having said that, each one of them is having an isolated life. And a lot of our families are nuclear. Like if you look at me, I'm into a nuclear yet a joint family kind of a setup. Uh, this this shift in the family dynamics or how it looks has played a very important role. And if you see, no, Nyati, it has very slowly yet steadily evolved. And I'm not sure if this evolution has been the best of it. Because if you look at it personally, as an individual, as a mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, whoever in the family, individually, I'm doing great because I've had a personality of my own. I'm doing great. But I'm not sure as a family together, we've been able to do what we were doing before. Like your and my need were fulfilled a lot of time by an adult in a family, even before even asking or demanding for it. Now there are times that because I'm also so individually involved, I'm not sure if I'm available for to even see if there is a need that's come up that I need to fulfill. And again, here we don't know if there is a blame that needs to come in, or we need to kind of celebrate the success of people finally trying to look at themselves. So, such a thin line sometimes, but that's only when you look out for therapies when you realize that do we need to celebrate or do we need to kind of pause, dig deeper and reflect on what needs to shift. And so, one of the major shift is this entire family dynamic aspects that's come in, where children are willing to grow independently and wanting to do a lot of things by themselves, but do not know when to go, or when do I need to do this by myself, or when do I need to seek help. And then the attention seeking behaviors may not always be the positive ones. And then we have this thing that any kind of attention is good attention, whether it's positive or negative, which brings up another Pandora's box of other issues that comes up. So major shift has come in those areas. Also, apart from this, the want to do more by an individual is also so much. मुझे ये भी करना है, मेरे को ये भी करना है. I want to achieve this also. And, a tad bit of that also will be great to have on the plateau. But am I overfilling it? Because of which I'm not able to give what I need to give to myself. So that also is bringing in a shift in the kids right now. The exposure that you were talking about, that they have so much more exposure than us. Somewhere, again, it's my personal take, I feel that they're getting the information much before than what they need to get it also. Like if you look at my 4-year-old right now, he asks me questions where at times I'm like stunned and bold. I'm like, how do I kind of respond to this? Because there's a question that's come and I don't want it to be unattended. But I also know that it's not a 4-year-old's brain to comprehend what I'm going to say. So the dilemma, like they've got an exposure, you can't do anything about it. And if they've asked, you cannot not answer. Or maybe if you circle back saying, okay, I'll come back to you on this, it's kind of unanswered there. So exposure comes to them so much more earlier than they need to have it, is also taking away a lot of that time and space to develop. Hence, sometimes boredom kicks in. And hence, sometimes issues with boredom kicks in. It's like the cat and mouse.
It's a loop. It's
spiral.
Spiral.
It just
goes on and on and on.
literally.
And the changing family dynamics from being in a big family setup, even if they were not living together, but you rightly said, they were not as busy. Not everyone was not as busy as people are now in the family. Everyone has their individuality and everyone's doing their own thing. And you need to kind of match calendars to even go out or, for a lunch or a dinner or whatever. So the child feels, maybe the child is growing up on his or her own and living in a nuclear family or a small family setup. Then are those also the concerns for the child to socially develop skills in a social setup?
Sometimes, yeah. Not always, because there's also something that comes in as inherent skills and inherent personality, or who I am as an individual. So I may be living with two people, but if I am inherently social and if that's what I am like as a person, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. But on the flip side, if you see that there could be a person had given that much exposure, would have bloomed differently? Yes, absolutely. Because also, Niyati, now the social setups have also changed vastly, right? Like what social setups looked like earlier, where it was meeting, gathering, physical touch, talking, uh, explaining, reasoning, venting, having fun. It's all the same, but in a very different lens. So social setups have also changed. Expectations of social setups have also changed.
Like, so what? Like how?
So somewhere I feel like, those informal, casual conversations and meetups that we would have has become a tad more of expectational, demanding, wanting to be in a particular way. And the obvious concept or thought of how much ever you deny it and how much ever any generation up till now will say, we've become better at it. I can definitely vouch. I don't think as much. I will say, log kya kahenge aspect, ये नहीं जाता है. So social setups, of course, this was more back then when our parents and we were there, but it wasn't as heavy as what it's become now, somewhere. Because I'm again speaking from experiences and conversations I've had with some of my clients and some of my students and bachas and their parents. Obviously, there's a breakthrough. I must say, 8 out of 10 people are saying, I don't care. But that back of the mind is there. Hence, that's the difference when I speak about the difference in social setups have also come in.
How do you deal with a child who comes to you with a concern? The child cannot understand how to kind of, put himself or herself in a social setting. They don't know. They don't feel involved, because this is a concern that I face a lot as a teacher in the classroom, that I'm not feeling included with my friends. They don't include me while playing, or they don't, they are not making me a part of their team. They're not letting me play, miss. So how do you deal with a child who comes to you with such a behavior or a concern?
Inclusion has always been a long lasting issue since generations.
Where does it come from?
Need to fit in, to be validated externally.
That goes down to our society, the way we are brought up.
Always, right? Have to be accepted well. Hence, the log kya kahenge, right? So, वैसे देखा जाए तो we are very different, but somewhere it's connected. Having said that, the need to fit in is also very high. It gives me an external validation. Somewhere it speaks of my internal validation is not enough for me. But we all, in that manner, look out for external validation, right? That little motivation, little appreciation gives us the kick to do a little more. But somewhere when kids come and say this, we tend to also kind of reflect on what about the group is that you would want to go in that group and want to do something. What about that group gets you to have the need to be a part of that group? That's something that is what we ask. And then when we have kids who would speak about, okay, I don't feel included, I think we need to start working a little more on their confidence. How are they viewing themselves as, majorly, mostly being comfortable in who they are as a person is very important. Accepting self. Because what is it that you're not getting that you would probably get from that space, or that you're looking out from that space? Validation will come for sure. That, it's nice to have a group. Obviously, it's nice to have a group. But then what more about it? So
if you had to give, like, say, 2-3 things to a parent or a teacher to deal with a situation like that, what would be your 3 pointers or 2-3 pointers?
To a parent or a teacher, firstly, I will always say hear them out. Because most times, since we are in that adult space, we get into jumping into that straight advisory space. Somewhere when we take this caretaker role, obviously very importantly, and like as the surface, thing of ours, but we miss out on the most important thing is hearing the child out. So hear them out. Let them finish it all. Maybe you can say, is there something more you would want to share about this? first things first, hear them out non-judgmentally, unbiased spaces that you need to do. Second thing is understand where is the child coming from? What is the need of the child to be a part of that group? Okay, I hear you say something like that. What is it that will help? What is it that you're looking out for when you say that you would want to be a part of that group? Is there something that you would want to take that, do differently for yourself? Or do you think you can do it by yourself? Something like that. And then we can move on to those conversations more on in this space with them, hearing them out, asking them what about the group. And somewhere you may want to indirectly begin on boosting their self-confidence and their self-image that they see themselves. So slowly and steadily shifting the lens that they have for themselves and having a more positive lens towards themselves where they accept themselves. Having that, okay, nahi le raha, koi baat nahi yaar. I can probably figure this out by myself. Do I really need them? And if I need them, why do I need them? What is the need for me to have them around? What's going to give me that validation that I'm not able to find it in my own circle. I'm looking for it externally.
Right, yeah, makes a lot of sense. This makes me think that even in our time when we were kids, we were facing these issues and challenges. I remember as a child, even I would have concerns fitting in and go to my mom and say that, they are not allowing me, they are not playing with me or whatever. But we figured a coping mechanism for ourselves. Because, I know how we were born and brought up rugged. Like, there is no therapy at that time. Like, we were not that aware. Right now, therapy is available.
Absolutely.
And many parents are open to seeking help and taking that because that platform is there.
Yeah.
So many parents are open to that. But when does it change from just counseling to kind of understanding that this is a red flag? Like, we need to really flag this. It's a concern. When does that change? There are certain behaviors that children have which could get solved just by counseling them, talking to them, making them understand. Like you said, hearing them out, asking questions, making them realize what they think of themselves. But when does that turn into like a red flag? Like, I sometimes as a parent I might feel that, or parents might feel that it's okay, समझ जाएगा, समझ जाएगी, it'll get better, but then it does not change or it does not get better. So when is the right time to take it seriously?
The first go they say it. Because why will a child say anything just for the sake of the fun of it? Why will anyone just say that, right? Today, if I have someone saying that, I didn't have a great day, they didn't want to say it because they wanted to add in another emotion to their day. They felt it, they said it, right? That's how it is. You take them seriously the very first time they say it. And if you think you can give them the support, great. But if you think if you need help, go seek help the very first time. Because we are parents. We are not God. Or even as teachers, we are teachers, we're caretakers, caregivers. We cannot do more than this. And that's what we need to understand as adults in the space of a child's life. So if there's a person coming and telling you this the very first time, take it seriously the very first time. It ends that.
There is a difference between I am facing a problem emotionally and I'm going and seeking therapy, or I'm going and seeking help, I'm going and talking to someone and they are helping me reflect and introspect. But if the problem does not get solved, it makes me more anxious. It builds more stress, anxiety. And that stress and anxiety keeps building up, keeps growing. Then what should be done?
And you're talking where you're already seeking help from a professional.
Yeah.
So if you think then that kind of help is not helping you, then you need to shift the person that you're seeking help from. Maybe because therapies come to a stagnation space. And you hit stagnation. In therapy, you have those spaces. If as a therapist or a professional, I'm aware about my journey with my client, I will speak to the client and say there is stagnation. I think I'm not being able to help you more. You need to seek help from someone else, because each one of us have a different way of approaching a concern and helping the person reflect and introspect, as you say. That's one bit. And if you think that it's becoming much more dysfunctional, you might then want to go see a psychiatrist, get in a diagnosis in place, and see how that is going to help you be more clear about what your need is or what the concern is. So that could be one next step.
So for children, what kind of diagnosis do we suggest in school? Two things. One is, what kind of diagnosis are suggested for children if we see a behavior which is repeated, which is not being addressed or being solved? And secondly, how does this diagnosis help in a school setup?
Suggesting diagnosis in school would be more of a counselor or a special educator, if in school, their job, because they would know what are the concerns the child has been having based on the history, observations that they've had, and then would go, they would refer them to a psychologist or a psychiatrist for that matter, and then the procedure falls in place for them in terms of getting a diagnosis. So that's one bit. And I feel personally diagnosis helps a lot. So with Indian society, again, diagnosis is seen as more of a label. And I think we should not consider it as a label. We should look at it as a lens that's helping us understand the child in so much more clarity and gives the child the kind of support the child actually needs. And I feel somewhere diagnosis is going to shift the lens of blame to a lens of, if nothing but empathy. And that shifting of lens builds a lot of confidence in the child itself. Because now I'm not seeing your behavior as a problem and giving you a punishment for it. I'm seeing your behavior as, yes, that's a call for help. And I need to do A, B, and C, because I know with the help of diagnosis, I have these kind of accommodations that I can be giving or support that I can be giving with the child. And then I do not give a punishment. Instead, I offer help to you. Instead, I offer alternative ways of doing things, So it plays a huge role, huge role. And here we are looking at school context. But if you're even looking at a context that out of school, or maybe, like with adults, it just gives me, like, for example, if I have fever and I'm just kind of popping pills with paracetamol and not know whether it's dengue or it's malaria or if whatever, if it's jaundice, I don't know. I'm just treating it in a generalized way. And it's not going to help me. It's going to make me feel temporarily okay. It's the same thing. If I have a deep-rooted concern and yes, I'm doing the bit that I need to do, but maybe therapy is just not enough. Maybe I need a diagnosis, need some medications, and then I know I'll feel much better. We're not looking at having medications as the ultimate way, but having that clarity on, this is what I have or this is what I'm experiencing and I need to approach it like this now. That's what kind of gives us so much more clarity to how do you even offer support at school or even otherwise. Like if there's a child who's having constant impulse issues and dysregulations in behavior, not able to pay attention, out of seat, these things, at first on the surface level, I'm always going to look at this child as behavior issues. नहीं सुनता है, follow ही नहीं करता है, homework भी नहीं finish करके आता है, he just doesn't want to do it, she's just not willing to do it. But it's not lazy. There is a concern. So when we get that diagnosis, you will be like, acha chalo, there is a diagnosis. There is maybe ADD, there's maybe ADHD. And I need to kind of support this child in A, B, C, D, E, F manner. And that's how it's going to help it. And then you see the shift in the child as well. Because the child will not then be felt cornered always. Will feel that, okay, this person's understanding my need and I think I need to probably open up. Not that you're going to see an overnight shift in the child, but just the space that the child feels comforted and feels heard, known, seen. And just the shift in their behavior, the motivation, the self-acceptance also brings in a lot of growth in that space. So diagnosis play a very important role. Having said that, there's also a space somewhere there's over-diagnosis happening. कि भाई यहाँ concern है, चलो भेज दो test के लिए, figure this out, do this, do that. There's also somewhere we need to know that diagnosis is not going to fix a problem. It's only going to give you clarity. कि यहाँ concern है, do this.
So when to diagnose? When do you know as a parent, if you see, or as a teacher, if you see, when do you recommend that I think you should
So if you see that there's been a consistent and a repetitive concern for academics, if you say so, consistently बच्चे के साथ there has been issues coming up, marks are just not showing up. You're seeing that child sitting and studying. नहीं हो रहा है. There is a miss. Catch the miss. You don't have to wait for 3, 4, 5 years for making it consistent. Even in 3 to 4 months, you've put in your work, you see the child putting the work, 6, 8 months, nahi ho raha hai. Kahin something is amiss. What is the miss? Maybe you can then go to your professionals in school setups, go to your counselor, go to the special educator in school, say, I see this in the child. We've tried ABC methods of different alternative teachings and we feel it's not helping. It's not that your child's not putting in enough effort as well. Then go to the professionals and get them to probably, maybe we need a little more understanding in that space. Maybe then get a diagnosis. That's academically. Behaviorally as well, you're trying really hard with the child to get the attention, or there's a miss socially somewhere. You don't know, is that our personality or is that something that's not okay? Getting into constant trouble, getting into constant fight, defiance, what's going on there? And probably the counselors also helping, but something somewhere's gone off. Then maybe. Usually when you're looking at school setups, diagnoses are more related to like an ADHD or maybe like an autism, maybe like a learning disability. Those are the spaces where diagnoses come in school setups. Few shifts and misses in behaviors will help you get it. But when you're looking at a school setup, majorly first comes therapy, first comes counseling. You look at it. And when you see an obvious academic miss, that's when the diagnosis comes in place. And then sometimes there is going to be a comorbidity. Like, there's going to be a learning difficulty along with maybe an attention issue. So there's going to be a comorbidity there. And that will help.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty clear. This takes me to asking you that as teachers and counselors in school, if we are, there's a lot of observation that we need to do. There's constant observation. And with the help of constant observation, if we have identified a pattern, okay, now there is this whole bridge that we need to cross and reach the parents. So I'm going to ask you that, how is that journey? Has it been easy in your experience to kind of get parents on board that your child requires help and we are here to help?
Yeah.
Has it been easy, or have you faced challenges? If you have, what kind of challenges?
It's fairly been easy for me because giving it to now parents, like I said, they're trying their best to be available for their kids. So it's more or less easy in my experiences. For me, I've been blessed to have smooth parents. One or two odd parents that I may have had who were in constant spaces of denial.
What happens with those one or two parents who are in denial, and why are they in denial?
I think sometimes overachieving parents or overachieved parents, they've done fabulous, flourished in life. And to see the child not being able to do basics of social, chalo, forget academics, is challenging for them to accept somewhere. Also, if I'm coming from a background that is so much more corporate, like there's all numbers and there's all like these bar graphs and, finances and everything in coming in place. If you're telling me something about the brain or if you're telling me something about social emotional aspect, I'm not sure if I even have the capacity in me to think about it or even the brain space to understand and comprehend what you're trying to tell me. So anyways, I'm so constantly busy in my life making sure that my child has a house and a plate full of food to have and some comforts here and there. I'm not sure if I'm going to understand what you're trying to tell me there.
So out of syllabus kind of a thing.
Completely out of syllabus.
How do you crack through such, parents? And I'm asking you this because even I go through this. There are so many meetings that we have combined with the counselor, with parents as teachers. And it, like, what is, if I can say, what is the knack to kind of get through them and make them understand that, dude, there's a problem.
Yeah. You won't be able to do it always, Niyati. There have been times that we've left the parents and we've said, okay, see, eventually they are parents. They are the child's parents. You can't do much about it. We are not willing to seek any support. Thank you so much. If there's anything, we'll come back to you. Thank you. Okay. We'll do as much as we can in the school's capacity, saying that, chalo, we'll work with the teachers indirectly and say, whatever you can do, this much to it. We can't see the child for counseling sessions, so that's completely out of area. You can't do that. So there are some times that you will just have to let it be. As much as uh, internally it's going to bleed because you know there is a cry for help and you're not able to give that. But you'll have to accept. That's something that comes with this profession. If there is a constant denial and a block there, you can't do much. Because चलो समझ लो मैंने जबरदस्ती I'm taking the child also. Saying that I will be taking the child, school protocol पे डाल दिया, I'm taking the child. But if the parent is blocked, any kind of help is not going to help. Because there's a block there, first thing.
And why is that block? Is it because, one, you mentioned that we already spoke about what? They are at a place or a space in their life and they probably don't have the bandwidth or capacity to understand that out of syllabus kind of a thing. But could it also be that they fear something?
Possible. Taboo.
Hmm.
Indian society is in taboo. Always keeps coming back. Yes, there could be a space. They won't openly speak about it. But you know, there are parents who will be like, अरे हमने इतना कर लिया, हमारे बच्चे कर नहीं रहे हैं. No. Grandparents are great achievers. Parents are achievers. You know, married someone who's equally achieving. बच्चा नहीं कर पा रहा है. लोग क्या कहेंगे? Comes back. There is a space. A fear of one bit of this. Other thing is what will happen with my child. So if I know one way of parenting, I'll keep doing that. Because somewhere it worked for me, it should work for my child also. So helplessness is also something that you'll see in them.
Yeah.
Which they are not aware of. That this is some space of helplessness. But you will see it coming. You'll see in them. So there will be no knack of cracking these parents down. The least that you can do is respect their thought and decision and hope for the best for the child and for them. Because somewhere when you're looking at the child needs help, in that space the parent also needs help.
Yeah.
Moreover, the parent needs help.
Right.
You bring in a shift in the parent's thought process, his personality, you'll see a shift in the child automatically. Not that concerns are going to go away,
Yeah.
but at least it becomes manageable, smoother for them to kind of work on, deal on. The least you can do is, and if you know that either of the parents, say there are times that you meet the parents and you realize that father's more open as compared to mom, or mom's more open as compared to father, and you start targeting one of those parents and having those conversations, you give them small little homework where why don't you try these things with the child, and how about both of you all having this thing together, little homework that could help. That's provided they come for the meeting. That's provided they're available with us. But little things, jitna ho sake, whatever in that time that you can give them a little bit that they can do in their spaces. And if you call them back and if they've really tried it and if it has worked, they will come back. They will come back. It's just that this process is long and you need to trust the process. Somewhere you'll have to let it be. Somewhere you'll have to hold on to it. That's where it is.
No, you rightly said the heart bleeds when you are not able to help if you really want to and you see the need. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Kruti, in your perspective and experience, what are the different struggles, like the biggest struggles that children go through in today's time?
Screen addiction, separation, separation from the parents, of the parents, both ways. Bullying, peer pressure. That's so evidently there in our school systems, yet from where it began to where we are right now, I think what's changed is just how it presents itself. Nothing more than that. It was so much more evident earlier as compared to how it is subtle, but there. Anxiety, stress in different ways it manifests itself. Academic pressure. And from all ways, sometimes teachers and parents could be coming from the best of the intentions, but they are demanding. And sometimes children themselves are demanding of themselves, So few struggles that you see a lot in schools. Attention concerns, impulsivity, which comes up in a larger spectrum of behaviors. Do you think?
What are some struggles that you will see more at age 4 versus more at age 12?
I don't think you can put them in a grade 4, or sorry, age 4 will be more into uh, screen addiction, and 12-year-old may not be. So I don't think there's a definite demarcation in those ways. But a 12-year-old will talk about stress, but a 4-year-old will not be able to talk about it. It's somewhere there. Not sure if it's understood in that way, but that's how it is. The anxiety or stress, they won't be able to articulate. They won't be able to express it the way it has to be expressed. So it's more of in that ways, because otherwise you see bullying, pressures, that goes from whatever age to whatever age. I can be bullied at 3-year-old, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds, as well as 12 and 16, and even later. So these few things persist. It just, again, it's just that how is it manifesting itself and how are they presenting itself in different age groups? That's what's going to vary. And how children experiencing it, if confident and strong enough, can articulate that. That'll make the difference. But I think the major umbrella stays the same.
And how can we differentiate between the need and the want for therapy based on these struggles that are existing today?
Interesting question, because, when you're looking at needs, we're looking at a more reactive way of approaching therapy, because it's become a need where it's become dysfunctional for the individual, and hence now there is a need. He needs therapy or she needs therapy. So whereas when you look at wants, you're looking at a more proactive approach with wants, where parents, teachers, adults, or even the person themselves, are aware that this is not okay. And I do not need to wait till it gets dysfunctional, and I need to seek help. And somewhere in those spaces, you will see shifts of movement in therapy. Like you'll see the person moving from one place to the other a little more faster, because the first job itself is taken care of very well. That is awareness. That yahan kuch gadbad hai.
And willingness.
And willingness. Absolutely. Willingness. So the need and want is so also subjective. So somewhere I think people need to look at therapy differently. Like therapy is not supposed to be reactive because it's made me emotionally dysfunctional. It is something that is supposed to nurture resilience. That's very, very important, because and resilience, as small and light and subtle the word is, but plays such an important role in our everyday life. Just merely the fact of moving on, wanting to move on in therapy as well, wanting to go for therapy, wanting to do things differently. That's what basic therapy needs to be looked at. So most of us yet look at a reactive way of therapy rather than looking at it in a proactive way. Difference between need and want. So that's how therapy plays.
Have you come across any case where you've seen that the child is willing to change? And then can you tell me how fast have you seen that child changing or manifesting into what they wanted to be?
So when the older kids, when I say older kids, I'm looking at more like 13 and 14 plus, when they walk into your room and when they just say, I need to talk, they mean business. Because they've gone through this entire internal dialogue before and gone through their entire fight about what they want to do, how they want to do, been to the partner if they have any, been to friends, been to parents, if they can talk to all of those. And then they're like, okay, I mean business, I need to talk, By then they're already halfway through in knowing where the problem is or what the problem is. They majorly come to seek help to just understand what can be done about this. Is that a problem, a big an issue, or what? How can I cope with these things? Somewhere it moves in a good speed, in a good space. Also with therapy, you're not looking at how fast it is and or how slow it is. We're looking at how much more accepting it is for that person, and how much of a difference it is making for that person when you're talking to them. Is it resonating with that person enough to be able to accept it as a thought and a shift that they need to make? So it's more into that. So we won't look into fast and slow speeds here, but we'll more look into how much more, again, accepting, how much more willing they are to kind of seek that suggestion in. So when the child walks in like that and you start having these conversations, you see them, you see those thought bubbles coming up, and you'll see them that, okay, something is going in somewhere, and you'll see the shifts. It won't be very, very prominent, but you'll see the shifts. The mere shift could be the child coming back to you again. That's it. Because with the older ones, you can't pull them out and say, chalo, baat karna hai, sit down. It's your time. Kya kiya? Last time you spoke this. But if the child comes back itself is a major shift. That's one step forward for the child and for you. The scope of moving. That's what we need to do.
And do most of the kids come back? Most if they need.
Most times they do. Because somewhere I feel they're coming back not just to get the help, they're also coming back for that space.
Yeah.
I need that space. I just want to come talk, chill. We've had,
Comfortable are they with you, the kids that you deal with?
if I'm looking at my journey, most of them have been very comfortable. To a point where we've had coffees together. We've had long conversations, nothing related to their concern, but everything around it. And somewhere we let that also be, because it just speaks a lot about what the child, you let the person take the lead. And if that person's taken that lead today, you follow, you flow. So most of them have come back. So it's been nice to see their journeys. I've had learners move out of school, gone into universities, and they're still in touch, so helps just to know that where they are right now and how are they able to regulate themselves with their coping mechanisms and are independent in that. So yeah, they come back. Most of them.
What about the ones who don't come back? We listen to and we read news every second day of students who are not able to cope up with the pressure.
Yeah.
Taking drastic steps.
Yeah.
Okay, and it is heartbreaking to see that. I don't know if I can say that, but in my opinion, the generation is too fragile. How do you help? Again, we spoke about parents who feel helpless.
Yeah.
But how do you help? What do you do?
So there's a space somewhere, I'm speaking for myself, somewhere you'd also feel, oh my God, was there more that we could have done in this space with that person, But from what I've seen or from what I've known from my mentors and, role models or gone and spoken, read, heard, somewhere we feel as professionals in that space, we've done the best that we could have done for that child. Especially when we know that there is a space that could be dangerous for this human themselves, we do become more alert. Your guards come up.
Approach
and make
is
sure,
different.
yeah, very. And your guards come up and you make sure that every space that child goes to is equally alert to know how things are. Whether it's family, whether it's a school, whether it's a job, or whether it's an internship, or the space that they're coming here to seek help for. Everyone's on guard. But still, there's something that's very tiny that slips in and takes away their entire resilience that they were up until now. Because somewhere that thought was overpowering than all the things that they've been through. And you can't control a thought. Every time people say, I want to control the way I think, you can't control. Can you ever control? The thoughts are free flowing. You can work around how you respond and react to them. You can't stop them. Somewhere that thought was so much more challenging and powerful than anything else that was done with that child. And that took charge. So if you look at kids taking those drastic steps, every person involved in that child's life to make sure the child is standing strong is deeply affected. to a point where I've had people in my professional circle who are now good friends had to go through a journey themselves to kind of just accept the fact that it was not them. It takes a lot for us to also come to a space saying that it was not us. We did all that we could have done. Because when we come in this space, we come with the fact that we are here for that person. And we are going to pour ourselves out, We will not leave one stone unturned to make sure the help is given to them. But it's eventually that person, their brain, their thought. How much can I help is whatever I can, I've poured that in. It's one thought that overpowered everything else. Did it.
And that's why I want to know that, that's why, again, coming back to diagnosis at an early age, because any drastic step that is taken at a later age, during teenage, or, so this drastic step a child takes in his or her teenage, maybe, is the root cause, or are the roots somewhere in the early childhood phase? I mean, yes or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. Not always. Because we spoke of confounding variables, they also play a role. Because I would have had a pleasant childhood. My 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years would have been great. And then things started shifting. If there's a family dynamics, there's a separation in the house, or if there's a partner breakup that I've been experiencing, anything like that, or suddenly an academic decline. It could be anything. Just health deteriorating in some way.
So not necessary that it's been building up since childhood.
No, not always. There could be a space there, but not with everyone.
Right. So to sum it up, what would you say? The need of therapy versus the want of therapy?
Both are okay. It's just like we said that as far as you're seeking therapy, somewhere for us it comes to a point where le lo yaar, hai na, we didn't even have it. We couldn't go to a person and talk and say, I need to talk, boss, you put everything down and talk to me. We didn't have that. You all have it. And the now generation is somewhere giving it to them so clear in what they want, right? So aware of this is where I am, this is where I need to be, and this is what I want to do. It's na clarity hai na. Great. So if you need help, if there is help, come take it. As far as you're taking help, everything else is going to be taken care of, whether it's a need, whether it's a reactive step, or whether it's a want and it's a proactive step. As far as you take therapy, you're nurturing your resilience. I think that's going to be okay. Kar lo.
Can you tell me a beautiful shift or a change that you've seen in a child post-seeking therapy? In your journey, if you can think of one thing.
So shifts come in a lot. And for us, when we look at shifts, we are not looking at big ones. For us, shifts means even those small, tiny steps that they're taking for themselves. I had this one bachu, I would see her very regularly. I'm sure she's grown up now though. But for her to take a stand for herself was the biggest issue. She just couldn't speak. A people pleaser. Hence would always be emotionally exhausted. Because always willing to try and please people. Academically doing well. So her need to please herself was also that high. And to be able to understand this is my emo battery. Isse zyada I can't use myself up. Whereas she would use this plus this and get exhausted. Whereas availability is only one. So when we've had these multiple conversations through, reflections, through few games and through charts and stuffs like that, slowly we were able to see that in some spaces of her life, she's able to take a stand for herself, able to identify that my battery is getting low. I can't be more available for this person anymore. So, and just to also know that to be available for somebody, I need to be there completely okay, or at least full enough to be available. So that awareness also kicked in slowly. And then to a point where she was able to be more independent in deciding what she wants to do and where she wants to go to be available. That really was nice to see. It was so much more refreshing to hear her own take and her own perspective on herself that but this was not okay for me, so I didn't do it. And I was like, are you hearing yourself? You said that. Like, oh yeah, I did. So some eureka moments in therapy are so much worth celebrating, and something that I've learned from my narrative practice that I've done, and I'll give it to them always, that always celebrate small wins. So whenever we would have these eureka moments in therapy or in sessions at school or even otherwise, we would celebrate. It could, for the younger ones, it could be given a star. That would be even otherwise. But if the parents were also on board, I would ensure that they all celebrate and come back and tell me how they celebrated. Because we make such a big thing about, oh my God, I couldn't do this. So it's evidently there in our brain. But why do some memories are so prominent with us? Because it's been celebrated. It's become grand. Hence with us, right? Like weddings and births and university graduations and all things.
Yeah.
So when you make something grand, it stays with you. And then your brain works in that space. Are ye kiya tha. You can go back to this. You're able to do this. You're capable to do that. So then we celebrate. And that was one thing that was beautiful with that child, that she didn't even realize she adapted that narrative for herself. It was not okay. I didn't want to do it. So yeah,
While I totally agree that it's very important to celebrate, and you very rightly put it, don't kids start feeling that every little win has to be celebrated then? I mean, there's a flip side to it also. No?
absolutely an excellent
Because
point.
then they want instant gratification for everything. That, oh, I did this right, nobody praised me.
Yeah.
Oh, I've done this, nobody said very good to me. I mean, there is a flip side also to
Of
that.
course. So
It's the balance.
yeah. So for us, when we know what we are celebrating, we don't celebrate always everything, right? And the other thing is this instant gratification. It comes in because I've always heard you're so good, you're so nice, you did so well, you know. But I think what we miss in celebrations or miss in appreciations is the skill that you're appreciating, you know, that bachu. So that's what we focus on. That it was nice of you to share. It was nice of you to stand up. I'm proud how you were able to take a stand for yourself. You're reinforcing the act. You're not reinforcing the child for being good. That's the difference.
Specific.
Being very specific, and it's okay. Like, you know, I was happy to see you were kind to a friend with the younger ones, you know. I was happy to see that you waited. Simple things which are such a miss lately, you know, waiting, respect talking, all these things. So when you see that, you need to be a little more specific. With sessions, we know what we are celebrating. We don't celebrate everything, but we'll definitely celebrate a shift where we see this person's moved now.
Yeah.
We need to celebrate that. And otherwise, for parents also, I think it would be nice to know that when you are appreciating and how you are appreciating. Very important, because that's bringing in the instant gratification. I need to be applauded by everybody, but kiya kya hai, jump kiya, great, you have to do this. Okay. So pick your points.
Correct.
In when to do it and how to do it. That will help.
Absolutely. If we have to sum up therapy and make our parents understand why therapy, and if you had to, you know, give some tips to kind of widen the awareness, what would it be?
I think look out for signs. They're available, they're there. You know, your kid will be giving those signs. Subtle, strong, however, whatever. You know, withdrawn behaviors, appetite loss, or irritability, agitation, sudden shifts in sleep patterns. Look out for signs that are there. And if you see even one, if not all of these, and it is kind of not in so-called normal as per the child's schedule and routine, dig deeper. Find what's going on with the child, you know. And I understand with teens, they're getting more and more short. They want their own space, their own world. But try to build a space early on in life with your child that they have, which is always open for them to come in. Create that safe space for your child where you're not making it uh, so obvious that it feels like a roundtable conference. ये नहीं हो रहा है, but you can have that, simple family practices if you kind of get into and make it more like a ritual, and fun things. It will give more opportunities for the child to pick on those and come and talk and come and share. So have those spaces available, because home is one space that is the child is the child. Do not have to make up and keep up in certain way that I have to present myself in some things. And that's where you'll see a lot of things. So be, I wouldn't say alert, but just be aware of how your child is doing. So look out for these signs that are there and seek help. There's nothing wrong. It's not any more tabooed or looked down upon, or, you need to feel that you're going to be called something, stuff like that. It could be a simple help of going to the child's school, looking for the school counselor and asking, this is what is happening. Am I overreading into it, or is there something seriously an issue? Because I'm not going to be always equipped with solutions and helping my kid out, right? So I will need help. So somewhere, if your child needs help, you go seek help first. Understand and then take your child to seek help as well. It's absolutely okay. I think somewhere that I would want to bring in more awareness is about these few things that we tend to think that it's phasic. It couldn't be phasic. It's not always phasic. Like, हर बार 15 दिन के लिए phase आता है and it goes away and then it comes back again. That's not phasic. That's not here to stay. And it shouldn't be here to stay. So be more vigilant in those spaces. And coming back to it, as young parents, those whoever, if we have those listening to us, from early on, build those spaces in your child's life where they feel this I can come and talk and vent and verbal diarrhea any point of time. You cannot have that space built later. If your child is more resilient and emotionally aware and available, they might be open to that space later in life. Great. But if it's built early on, that space does wonders, because then you don't need to sit and make the formal space. It was always created. So as parents, I think something we need to kind of get very actively involved on. Of course, you do all the things with your children. Go out, have fun, give them the best of education, classes, everything, all kinds of comfort, luxury. Why not? Why not? But apart from that, have that one family ritual that's embedded in the child's brain, that this is something that is there. And it's a fun thing. There's nobody who's going to come and pick a lens and view you in that lens. That helps a long way. Builds a child emotionally beautifully, because the child knows I have the space to go and talk to now. I wouldn't mind. So somewhere there. Also, if you're talking about how would I want the awareness to go in, I just feel parents themselves in the now age are going through so much. Even for the mere fact of showing up the next morning for themselves and their child is a big thing. So if they need help, look out for help. Because if they seek help and they find themselves doing okay, their children will automatically pick on that energy, pick on that aura, pick on that emotional mood that's floating in the house. And they'll automatically be in a space that the parents want them to be in.
Yeah.
Because if I'm strained, every other relationship of mine is going to be strained. So most of us are talking so much about children and what to do with them and how to do with them. I also feel somewhere we need to start talking about parents and how they need to be more aware about their mental health, so that their children's mental health, their child's emotional well-being is there in a space where they want it to be like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that space is, in terms of awareness, is also very, very important. However, while I say this, I also know that a lot of parents are there. They're getting there to know that, okay, that's my boundary. I don't think I can do that. So some spaces, looking out for signs, knowing your boundaries, and seeking help, even if it's big or small. We are no one to decide how big or how small it is. Go for it. Go with the flow and understand whether it was big or small with your child.
Yeah. I think that sounds very, very helpful, Kruti. Thank you very much for being here. Before we end, we'll do a quick rapid fire just to grill you a little bit.
Sure, let's go.
Okay, let's start. Let's try to be a little rapid.
Oh my god.
Would you prefer coffee or chai after a long day?
Coffee.
Would you prefer therapy sessions outdoors or indoors?
Both.
If kids had a pause button or rewind button, which would you recommend and why?
Pause. It gives us a lot of scope of reflection. I would want to pause, reflect, and move ahead. I'm not sure if everyone's okay going back.
What, according to you, is the difference in the mindset of first benchers and last benchers?
Today's day, nothing.
Absolute. There are no first and last benches nowadays.
There are a few, but you'll see the first benchers Googling or eating, and you'll see the last benchers doing that too. And you'll see both of them studying or doing nothing. So,
No fear.
no, nothing.
If you want a counselor, what's the one career you would love to be in?
Dancing.
Okay, then on that note, we're going to end our session today.
Sure.
Thank you, Kruti. I think we have a lot to talk.
Yeah.
And we should have a part 2 of this.
I would love to come. I would love to come. Thank you so much for having me over. As much as I feel that we may have like wandered. Also, somewhere tells me therapy is like that. You wander. You do not have a definite way to go into, and
Come back.
but you come back. But you come back.
Yeah, and we are having you back soon.
I am going to wait for that call.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Signing out.
लोग क्या कहेंगे? क्या कहेंगे लोग?
क्या कहेंगे लोग? Today's conversation was all about log kya kahenge if you want to seek therapy and counseling. And what we learned from Kruti is
how one can break myths about counseling and therapy,
and how counseling can be introduced to children at a very young age.